Hello everyone and welcome to the second in our series of interviews. Today we're speaking to Kirstie Penk of the Legal Director, and I'm not going to say too much about what Kirstie does because I'm sure she can put it much better than I can, but I think what she's going to share with you is a quite different way of working, where you can be quite flexible, quite agile, potentially work remotely, but also with the client as well. And it's just really a different way of thinking about working, I think, which was the whole point in this series for me, was to show people that there are many different ways that lawyers can work these days. And it's not sort of one size fits all, or perhaps the size that we thought it would be when we left law school and started our careers. So without saying any more, I'm going to hand over to Kirstie. And yeah, Kirstie, if you just sort of introduce yourself and, you know, what the Legal Director is as a business, and maybe just tell us a little bit about your journey to get here, if that's okay.
Sure, certainly. Okay, hello everybody. I am one of the owners and directors of the Legal Director. It's a business. We are a regulated law firm, and we've been operating for almost 12 years now. I've been involved there for 10. And we have quite a different proposition for clients and for lawyers, actually. So we supply senior general counsel to work in businesses, and we do that on a part-time basis. So they work for a company as their in-house lawyer, normally their sole in-house lawyer, typically for between 1 and 6 days a month at any one time, and they will have 6 or 7 different clients that they're operating with. The model is the self-employed consultants, so very much along a kind of virtual law firm model. The lawyers work from home or on a client site, that very much depends upon the client that they operate for. And we operate across the country. We've got a team of 32 lawyers now, and the only thing they have in common is they're all at least 10 years qualified, and they've all had a lot of experience in-house. So that's the kind of model. Shall I explain about my background?
Yeah, so from qualified lawyer to what you do
sure.
now. So
okay,
what's his history?
So I qualified in 1993, which feels like a very, very long time ago. And I did my training at Watson Farley in London, which was a shipping firm. And when I qualified, it was one of those dips in the profession where if somebody offered you a job, you took it. And I qualified, I was offered a job into commercial property, which I did for about, apologies Hannah, I did it for about 6 months and thought, this is not for me.
Oh.
So I kind of thought, okay, and you know, particularly at the time, not so much now, but I think particularly at the time, you know, you got pigeonholed very quickly within a role in a law firm, and I thought after 6 months, I thought this is not what I want to be doing. So I kind of looked around at what the other alternatives were, and took what at the time, actually reflecting, was probably quite a risky decision, and decided to go in-house. The business I went to work for, their advert said, we want somebody to help with our contracts. And I got there, and they were a NASDAQ listed business. They just listed on the NASDAQ the year before. They had one lawyer in the US, but nobody to cover Europe. So I kind of turned up there, 6 months qualified, and then sort of proceeded this massive sort of baptism of fire. We bought another business which was virtually the same size as us in Tel Aviv. NASDAQ listed business, was heavily involved in that. And we bought set up a manufacturing plant in Ireland. We had 36 subsidiary companies around the world. So my kind of role expanded. And then ultimately by 2000, I was promoted to GC there. So by which time we had kind of grown to about 7,000 employees, and the turnover of the business was about 350 million. It's quite a huge business. During that time, I was then running a team of about 5 or 6 people. So I kind of did that. Then the dot-com bubble burst, as it were, and the business shrank massively. Not quite overnight, but there was a variety of business reasons why that happened. And I then bought the business from the receivers with 4 of my colleagues. And then we ran that for about 4 years before finally putting that piece of the business, the little bit that was left by then, into receivership when I was on maternity leave. So my husband and I took opportunities to kind of think, okay, we can stay down here and spend all our savings paying the mortgage. I didn't want to go back to work straight away, having got a tiny baby. So we used that opportunity to relocate back to Yorkshire. And so we did that, and luckily sold our house at the right time and was able to move kind of mortgage free. I didn't work for a few years. And then after, I don't know, after he was about 18 months, so I'd probably been off for about 4 years. I kind of thought, okay, what do I want to do now? And it was obvious I didn't want to do the kind of role I'd had before. So it was just in terms of the hours I was spending and the traveling I was doing. And so I kind of looked around, and because private practice had been such a long time ago, I never really considered that, and thought, okay, I want to be in-house. If I want to go and work part-time, I'm going to have to work in a big legal team, because there's no way I'd get a part-time role otherwise. And actually what I'll then be doing is just pushing bits of paper around, which wasn't what I wanted to be spending my time doing either. So the legal director were advertising, and I kind of saw an advert in the Gazette, which I don't even know if the Gazette exists still, but it was the Gazette. So and I joined 10 years ago on the 1st of May, so 2009, in their kind of first wave of recruitment. So, the concept worked perfectly for me, being able to be involved at a high level in a business, but just do it part-time and flexibly. So that was 10 years ago, and now I'm one of there are 3 of us who own it jointly and run the business together. I work from home in Doncaster, one of my colleagues is in Bristol, the other one's in London. So that's kind of how we got to now.
So do you see, I was talking to someone in-house the other day who wanted to help with this series and putting information together, but didn't want to be on camera, let's put it that way. Because I think with some people I speak to, they want to share their views and things, but they do have to think about their employer and how it comes across and all that sort of thing. So, I know we're very lucky with the speakers that have come to join us, because there's lots of people who are happy to provide information outside, but not come and speak. So, but what he was talking to me about was, he felt that going in-house meant that he could be a bit more broad spectrum with his work, because his feeling was that in practice these days, people are having to niche down quite a lot. Yeah. I think you mentioned that when you were talking. Do you see that? Do you think in the sort of role that you and your lawyers have, you can be more broad
Absolutely. I mean, the businesses we act for, 90, I'd say over 95% of the cases, we're the sole lawyer there. So by virtue of that fact, you have to be able to turn your hand to everything. You have to. It's as important to know what you don't know as what you do know. Frankly, to be able to say, actually, that's just not my expertise. We need to get in some external help. Which for us can be another member of the team, or it could be an external, traditional law firm. We do that a lot. We instruct external law firms on behalf of our clients when it's a transaction, or when it's something that's a very niche regulatory piece, or something that we just haven't got the knowledge. But absolutely, my experience of in-house, I think that generally, unless you're working in a big legal team, when frankly a lot of them are organised much more like law firms, where you are dealing with your little bit of the business or your little bit of the regulation or whatever it is, I think generally an in-house background does give you a broader brush of everything, because you have to be able to do from employment to a bit of property to dispute resolution to dealing with suppliers, distribution agreements. And I think through that, kind of commercials, what everybody's bread and butter is commercial law. I mean, within our team, we've got people who've, everybody's got a very commercial experience, general commercial work, but they within that may have done a lot of corporate work, they may have done some sort of franchise arrangements, they may have done a lot of VC funding rounds, for example. So within that, they've got their own area where they have done before, but that's as much based on the sector they've worked in, really.
Right. Okay. So you don't tend to have you wouldn't have a specialist employment lawyer or a specialist property lawyer or something like that. It's that more general commercial experience.
The majority of people, I mean, interestingly, our kind of experience of in-house is that the first things that get too specialist in terms of your knowledge will go to a certain level. And the first things that you will kind of be out of your depth on, generally speaking, will be property, will be employment, and will be litigation.
Right.
So when I was in-house, they were the three things that absolutely, I could deal with very basic stuff, but then pretty quickly you needed to get external advice from somebody who was a specialist in those fields. And we kind of reflected that in our practice, because we actually have two lawyers who are property lawyers, commercial property lawyers, and that's all they do. And they pretty much service the rest of the team with their property requirements that come up in their clients, as well as having some clients in their own right. But that's predominantly why we chose to do that. And actually that and possibly we have a lady who does a lot of employment law as well. So they're the kind of two areas that we have that expertise in-house, because we recognise that they're the first things that in-house lawyers do want to send out.
So you can have sort of one of your lawyers is sort of in-house as general counsel, and then if they have a need for that other specialism, they'll get involved one of your other colleagues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So what's the best part about the way you work, about your model? What are the best things?
I think we did a voice the team exercise where we asked all our lawyers, it's about this time last year actually, and we had an independent third party ask them 6 or 7 questions and kind of compiled the answers there. And what came across there, the sort of things they love the flexibility, which goes without saying. That's absolutely one of the key drivers for people to consider doing things a bit differently, I think. But what they really enjoyed as well was the level at which they're involved in clients' work. So because we're not a cheap resource, so you are involved in a business at a high level, and frankly, which can actually be sometimes different from being an employee. People do listen to what the advice you're giving them sometimes, and sometimes that working in house for something where you're almost part of the furniture and you've been there years. Sometimes getting your opinion across in a way that the business will listen to you sometimes can be difficult. Whereas because we're one step removed from that, and because they're paying a lot of money for advice, the chances are people will listen, and that's quite refreshing, I think, from coming from a pure in-house background where you worked for one client all the time. Having that mix, kind of allows you to do that. So that was definitely one area, and the other thing that our lawyers loved was the team. The team we built, because of the just having like-minded people who've been there, done it around the block. I mean, we have a very sort of active WhatsApp group and email thing, when people are just sort of saying, this has come in, I've been approached by a client's had a letter from the marketing standards agency, what do I do? This has come in, does anyone know a lawyer in Sweden? That kind of stuff, and they really value that ability to kind of bounce things off each other. So I think they're the two things really. And I think one of the other things probably just to mention is we took a decision very early on in our evolution to actually be a regulated law firm, and there are a number of players that in the marketplace currently kind of do what we do but aren't regulated. And we know that's an important factor for clients and for the lawyers who join us. So I think that's something else that's probably a good way of working in the way that we do. Gives you added protection, security.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And you touched on it there in terms of, you're a valuable resource, because, the client is paying and they're paying a good rate and things like that. So without, don't want to be too personal, and people hate being asked about money, but in terms of your business and, the remuneration for lawyers versus traditional practice, is it comparable? Is it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we closed our financial year about a month ago, so we kind of shared some of these numbers with our team at our team meeting last week, and so I can tell you that we had, out of the 32, we had 6 lawyers who had billed to the clients more than 250k, of which under our model they take 70% of that. Right. So that kind of gives you an idea. So it's absolutely comparable with what you would earn both as a full-time in-house lawyer and what you would earn in private practice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I sometimes think from my own experience when I've been at Gunner Cook talking to people about the Gunner Cook model, I think they sometimes think that in these models it's a decision to earn less money perhaps than to be in practice, and I think sometimes they don't appreciate it's not.
No, absolutely not. And interestingly, we've got a big recruitment drive on at the minute, and one of the things we're looking at doing is attracting women, and women in particular they like the flexibility. Personally, I think that they're better at this way of working, because for us, the thing that a client loves to feel is that they've got access to you all the time. But actually, they're only paying for you part time, but they have access to you all the time. And actually, women, I think, are better at kind of creating that facade, or whatever you want to call it, that kind of image that's what they're, being responsive in that respect. But then when we also when you look at the profile of the people who are in our team, and those that earn, where people sit in the kind of earning states. I mentioned to you earlier that the sort of we've got 6 people who build more than 250k. Five of them are women, so they're not using this as a way of just fitting things around the kids. Kind of at the other age. I mean, interesting as well. The average age of our team members is about 46, I think. So they've typically come out the other end of doing the young kid thing, and are now looking at kind of doing something a bit more challenging from a full-time career point of view, but just being able to do it in this way.
No, that's really interesting, because I think you mentioned, did you, that you usually ask for sort of 10 years experience in the model.
Yeah, that's because they are, you are the sole lawyer in for the client, so you need to have that level of experience to be able to basically get off the fence and tell people from a commercial point of view as well as a legal point of view what they should be doing.
Yeah. Okay. And so what are the downsides? What are the bad points about the way that you all work in your business?
I think we have seen a number of people kind of struggle with, particularly if you've come from a sort of full-time in-house role to doing this, where you're out of home every day, you have a routine, physically go out to work. So, I mean, personally, I love it, and you couldn't pay me enough money to do that kind of job again. But some people really struggle with the change from that, not kind of having that constant interaction, the kind of water cooler moments. And some people have got around that by, it's slightly better with our model in the sense that people work on client sites, so you do get that interaction. You can push yourself out more and say to the client, I'm coming in today, rather than doing some stuff from home for you. And we actively encourage that. Or what people do as well is they find themselves an office just locally, and kind of have that thing where they go to the office. So I think that's one area. And then I guess the other thing is the general security issues around not having a guaranteed salary every month, and the benefits you would get with that. You also don't get the politics and the rubbish that comes with it when you get that. But there's swings and roundabouts, and I think for some people as well, they're kind of primarily under our business, the lawyers are responsible for finding their own work predominantly. It's typically around a 2/3, 1/3. We tend to find 1/3, they tend to find 2/3 based on their networks, and sometimes that can be can put people off. You need to be quite entrepreneurial to think, I can do this. It's all really about your appetite for risk, I think, so whether it's going to work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because when you were talking earlier about your in-house experience before you got to where you are now, and obviously thinking about talking to Claire last week, and also knowing my own background, I only did about 9 or 10 months in-house with the county council, but I've had that experience as well. And I wonder if there is a link between people who have more of that in-house experience then going on to, as you say, perhaps be more entrepreneurial, be more in the sort of self-employed space.
Yeah, maybe. I think certainly my experience gave me exposure to that, which if you came from a traditional law firm background, you wouldn't necessarily get that. You certainly don't get that within a law firm model. It would depend upon the access to clients you had, really, I think. And I think that would be the only chance you'd get access to that for entrepreneurial and just seeing other people take risks as well. I think you gain confidence in that to an extent as well.
And so I suppose we're thinking about it from that sense of needing to be probably 10 years qualified, have that experience, have some of those personal contacts with clients and things. There might be people who listen to this who think, well, that's not me, I'm only 4 years qualified or 6 years qualified or whatever. But do you think it is a case of, well, at least if you know what your options are in the future, you can plan your career a little bit more?
Absolutely. We have conversations with people all the time who are interested in joining us, some of whom either have got to, they've done a kind of chunk in-house, but sometimes the in-house they've worked in has been very specialist, and we've kind of said, look, you need to, we'd love to take you, but you're not ready yet because you haven't got enough generalist background. These are the sorts of businesses you need to be looking at working in, and we can work with people to develop a bit of a long-term plan so that they can ultimately come and work with us once they've got a bit more of a relevant kind of commercial experience. And the same applies for numbers of years. I mean, I met a lawyer yesterday who was absolutely fantastic, and actually I think she'd actually only got 7 years PQE, but the experience she'd had, the exposure she'd had since, in that time was phenomenal, and the kind of gravitas which she presented herself and the way that she would absolutely be able to talk to a business at a high level. So we'll offer her a role, so we'll see whether she had to join us or not.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask that actually, so I'm glad you've mentioned that. It's not a strict requirement of 10 years, it's more of you get a sense for what that person looks like who's got that level of experience, and sometimes in someone who's younger.
Yeah, it is definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've probably already answered this question, but is there a sort of person, traits, characteristics that you think this sort of role suits the best, or people who it wouldn't be suited for? And I think we've probably covered a lot of it, but is there anything we've mentioned?
Yeah, I think the the experience side is interesting because as I mentioned, we're very much looking for in-house lawyers, but actually when you're an in-house lawyer, you never have to sell yourself because you're there and the client comes to you. So actually for us, it's often if people have had a mix of both. So they've done the kind of private practice stuff, they've done the having to go out and do the networking things, and they also know how to value themselves, how much to charge themselves out at, because that's quite a skill in itself, which if you come from a pure in-house, you don't often have that exposure. So for us, it's somebody who's done a bit of that as well, I guess. But I think more importantly, it's somebody who is a bit entrepreneurial and wants to kind of really grow something for themselves, which is very much how we kind of operate. Although you do it within the legal director framework, you're utilizing all our resources, etc. It's very much something that you want to be able to be in control of to grow yourself. I think you need to think about things like that, and with that you also need to be a bit of a team player, and to really, when you go into a business, to not really have a big ego as well. Sometimes I think that helps, because you have to be able to roll your sleeves up and get on with whatever is put across your desk, and also probably not have the desire to have this big name of being an employer, to be able to say I'm working for this big business. We have some great clients. We do have some great clients, and I guess you can kind of get that a little bit, but it's not the same as saying you're GC at Apple or somewhere. You're sort of big kind of big brand name. So I think we require people who are able to kind of get on with stuff, and just want to do that kind of level, of that kind of commercial level with a client, which really entails getting off the fence and not kind of hiding behind the law, but coming up with some real practical solutions. So I think that's a requirement too. You need to have focus on what the commercial solutions are for things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose it's a bit of a case of, for those who are listening who are the sort of 5 to 8 year sort of qualified mark, it's a case of, particularly if you are maybe still in traditional practice, which I'm sure many are. I do talk to a lot who are saying, well, do I go in-house? Do I not? I've heard that in-house is better for work-life balance and things, which, speaking to people who are in-house, I think it really depends where you go. I don't think it's as simple as, yes, in-house is better. Sometimes the hours can be a lot worse. But I suppose from what you've been saying here, it's a case of, well, okay, if you are at that sort of 5 to 8 year qualified level and a model like you're talking about would be attractive in the future, then look at whether you've got some suitable in-house experience. And if you are thinking about a move for now, then maybe a move to an in-house to get some of the experience you would need down the line would be something they could think about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's useful. I hope that's useful for people. So a topic I always like to bring up with people, because it's close to my heart, is mental health and well-being in the law is, as we all know, a real problem, a very undiagnosed and unreported problem, I think. Do you have advice about how you look after yourself, your own well-being, and maybe that of your team and your lawyers and things?
Sure. I think, well, just on a personal level for me, there's probably well 2 or 3 key things. Exercise is a key thing for me. If I don't get enough exercise, then everything goes downhill pretty quickly. So I think that's quite important. I do some meditation, which I quite enjoy, I have to say. And it's sometimes difficult to see. Sometimes this idea of it being flexible and all the lines being blurred between work and home, and that in itself can have its own pressures. And I think it's just being aware of that and thinking, okay, you know, the kids have gone to bed, I'm not going to put my laptop back on tonight. And it's very easy to get back into that, to get into a routine to do that. I think sometimes that's for me. I know I have to go, okay, that's it, I'm not doing that. I mean, I can't remember the last time I actually worked at the weekend, which is nice, but then, you know, I'm a bit more in control of my working hours, particularly as I don't actually do any client work anymore, so I don't have any of those pesky clients to be annoying me. But I think that's quite important. I mean, at the legal director, what we've done is we've recognised actually that we're very much this typical sandwich generation. So, you know, dependent children still and ageing parents, and kind of just being stuck in the middle of that sort of conundrum in life generally. And because we're all of a similar age as well, age range, everyone's in a similar position. And we had 3 or 4 events last year, not that, but that impacted the team from very close members of their family. Which obviously then has an effect on them and has an effect on the team generally. So we've introduced a thing called Mind Matters, which basically allows the team access to 6 sessions with a health professional, which we will fund, and they can do that remotely or sort of. It's a national organisation, so that was something we felt quite strongly on, and we also take it very seriously. We had a lady last year, actually, for example, who took a sabbatical for 9 months, and we just said that's fine. You know, she needed to kind of clear her head and had some personal stuff going on, so that worked really well for her. And she actually came back 3 weeks ago and looks phenomenal. Actually, I have to say, she's definitely a changed person for you know, for the process and being able to take that time and take that step back.
So from a cynical perspective, would you say that as a business owner, it works for you to have those things in place to support your
yeah, I mean, clearly it's a you know, for us it's a recruitment tool potentially, I guess, you know, because but it is something we genuinely feel quite strongly about. I mean, the team we have created is very much given the demographic, everyone's going through a similar stage in life, and you know, as we evolve, I think that's always going to be the case. And I think kind of recognising that we we closely, not really monitor the team, but we have regular touch points with them, and we have a sort of standard checklist, and the first and the last thing is always, okay, what's going on with you personally? Is there anything we can help with? What's been annoying you? You know, whether it's, you know, dealing with a client who's driving you insane, for example, or, you know, there's been a change of personnel and there's been a clash of personalities. That's one thing, but then there's also, you know, how's your mum? You know, I know she was ill last time we spoke, or it's, you know, is your daughter's exams going okay, or, you know, it's kind of just treating people as human beings, really, as they have, you know, a life outside work, you know, which frankly is far more important than the work stuff. So that has to be going well too. So anything we can do to support that is going to benefit us, you know, as a business as well.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree. I'm glad to hear more and more businesses that are finding that as well. Something you mentioned, I'm going to jump back to. You said you'd had 4 years off, not working at, you know, in any capacity as a lawyer. How did you find that going back afterwards? Because I often speak to people who are worried about even taking the year off for maternity, you know, or even less. Whereas in the scheme of things, I mean, you had 4 years. Did that really impact your confidence or ability?
It was what I think was different, and added dimension for me was all my kind of working career when I ran Madge, the computer networking business I've mentioned earlier, where I was in house first. That was down in Maidenhead. So I've been in London for my training. I've been in Maidenhead or sort of High Wycombe area for sort of all my working career, and then we relocated back to Yorkshire. So not only did I have the going back to work, it was kind of going back to work, doing something new, and not knowing anybody from, you know, all my business contacts were down south. I had nobody sort of in the north, and I think I was probably a bit, probably a bit naive when I first kind of started it and thought this is going to be, really easy and oh yeah, this would be great. I can people I can just get in touch with people I used to work with and they'll kind of, fall over themselves to give me work. But actually, what's changed really in that 10 years has been the acceptability of working in a different way. And I actually think it's much easier to do that now than it was, certainly. And I don't know whether I think it was a bit of a leap of faith. I knew I wanted to do something. I think what drove me to it was looking at what the options were. I just knew I didn't want to do the other things. So it's kind of like, you either make this work or I'm going to have to go and work for a big in-house team. And I just didn't want to do that either. So I think it was more to, and frankly as well, having a supportive husband at home helped. Saying you go and give it a go. We can. Having a bit of a financial cushion is invaluable. Just to say you don't need to be earning X by month one. Having that bit of flexibility to really get into it, to develop a business plan, which is actually what we focus very clearly with our new starters around that now. So they've got a very defined structure of what they're going to be doing, who they're going to be speaking to, a rota of contacts and networking events and things like that. So I think we didn't have any of that when I started, so it was a bit of a leap of faith. But I think I believed in the idea. I believed in what we're selling in terms of, because of my experience, I knew that the model works for businesses. It's absolutely the way legal services, in my opinion, should be sold. And it's just a question of convincing people of that, which sometimes can be tricky.
Yeah. No, I love what you said there about with your new people now, you have action steps with them, like a plan, because I think that, from a sort of personal development or coaching or whatever perspective, to get out of feeling that you're lacking in confidence, or you're procrastinating, or you're stuck, or you don't know where to go next, is just to take some action. Any action,
very much.
Small ones, and that idea that you work with them on that. Having that action plan, so on the days when you think, I'm not sure if I know what I'm doing, I'm not sure if I'm good enough at this, or if it's going to work, but just having those little actions to take.
Absolutely, I sent somebody an email 3 weeks ago and they said, contact me in a month. I need to do that today. It is having those little steps of feeling like you're doing something. I think that's important.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. And then there was one extra question that we talked about just before we went on to record here. And that was along the lines of so much has changed in the legal profession in the last 10 years, the existence of businesses like yours, like the one I work through. Even I was mentioning this week that I was at a talk where they showed us, just over 10 years ago, there were no smartphones. It was those awful Blackberries. There was hardly anybody on Facebook and all these sorts of things. And yet, we've transformed technology and the way it works with law in the last 10 years. So, what are your thoughts about what maybe the next 10 years holds? What changes are we going to see in law firms, lawyers?
I think, there's certainly it has been a massive shift. In terms of, I've seen that myself in talking to businesses, in businesses' willingness to engage with lawyers in a different way has changed phenomenally, as have lawyers' willingness again to take a bit of a risk and to think, actually, this is a viable way of working. It's not just something to fit around the kids. You can build a career out. And interestingly, the people who've been approaching us to join are getting younger as well, because people are looking at this as a real career choice, rather than just something I'll either do to slip into retirement or something to do while the kids are little. And I think that's changed massively. What I don't think will change is that people will always want to deal with people from a relationship point of view, from a networking, from a feeling like you belong, from a trust point of view. So I don't think lawyers are going to be done away with wholeheartedly, and I think there will always be a place for particularly senior lawyers to build relationships, because that's what it's all about. About helping businesses, and both parties getting a kick out of that. So I don't think that will change. I don't think the robots are going to take over, in that respect. I see more changes in the way people do things, not necessarily, you know, sweeping out big swathes of the legal profession and swapping it for a robot. I mean, the technology, I mean, undoubtedly, you couldn't work the way you work, and I couldn't work the way I work without technology. So that's definitely come on leaps and bounds in that period, and that's only going to get better. You know, you'll be able to, who knows, whether you will have some sort of 3D screen thing where you physically feel like you're in the same room as people. I mean, you know, rather than just kind of all staring at your own screen. There'll be technology advances like that, which will allow more connections between people. So that's what it's all about. So relationships, I think, are the key, and will remain key.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think no matter how much AI replaces some of the document production or whatever, there's always going to be that human element to it of maybe advice and guidance and you know, being that advisor
and sharing experiences, and also, you know, well, law's not black and white, so you can't say this is, you know, this is the way you have to draft that clause is one thing, but then, you know, this is the way I would suggest you can expand into this territory. It's something completely different. There's definitely different levels.
Yeah. So you agree it's not doom and gloom then?
No, I don't think it's doom and gloom. I don't think it is at all. I think there will be a blurring of lines with stuff in terms of, you know, legal, business, account. There won't just be, you know, you go to this professional for this thing. I think I mean, I've seen that, you know. We've done a number of pitches recently where we've pitched in a solution to a client which includes not just lawyers, so other professionals, other people with different skill sets, and I think that will expand definitely, because people just want a solution. They don't care whether it's, you know, legal or finance or tax or whatever. They just want the whole thing sorting out for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely, completely agree. Well, thank you so much, Kirstie. That's been really interesting. And I hope obviously interesting for everybody who listens. And are you okay to answer any questions if people email me with any questions after watching?
Of course, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And I will hopefully speak to you soon.
All right then. Thanks, Hannah. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.